Good morning and welcome to Community Culture, Arts and Sports Committee number 8 for 2022. I see that we've got all councillors in attendance. So we'll move to Councillor Kunzelman to offer up the Acknowledgement of Country this morning.
Thank you, Chair. This committee acknowledges the previous owners of the land on which we meet today, and we welcome the attendance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to this meeting. We recognise the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to the amenities that we are covering in this committee, and we welcome their participation.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. And I'll pass over to the Mayor for a few words about the late Her Majesty II Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of Ipswich City Council and the residents of Ipswich, I wish to acknowledge the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. This loss has been felt deeply across our community. In this period of mourning and reflection, we remember Her Majesty's long life of devoted and dedicated service to the peoples of the Commonwealth. May she rest in peace.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Moving on to item number 1, which is a response to notice of motion for Council to develop a domestic violence strategy. I just want to note that we do have Councillor Doyle, who brought this to the full Council, in attendance in the gallery as well. Would anyone like to speak to any particular Council officer with regards to this? Councillor Kunzelman? Yep. Thanks.
Good morning, Melissa Dower, Community Development Manager.
Good morning, Ms Dower. I'd just like to ask when we're likely to see, I thank you for the report, and I'd like to ask when we're likely to see the website, which of course is one of our chief activities in this area, isn't it?
Yeah, most definitely, raising the awareness. I will leverage off the subject matter experts, so the Domestic and Family Violence Integrated Response Team, to ensure that the content that we actually put on the website is relevant, localised, and meets the terminology and the needs of the state legislation. So I'm going to say, Councillor, that over the coming months, I'll collectively work with a working party. So we hope to see in the new year that it'll be up and running.
Thank you. That was my only question.
If I may, Chair, thank you, Ms Dale, for the work on this notice of motion and your work in the community, and same with your team. I note point 6 from the notice of motion was advice on building a domestic and family violence strategy within Council, including resources required to complete this work and estimated timeframes. I just want to inquire how that's progressing. I know that's it's outlined in here, but how is that progressing in particular?
So recently, Mayor, 2 weeks ago, the Domestic and Family Violence Integrated Response Team all came together, which is the Department of Justice and Attorney General is leading that work. And in that response, an action that came out of that meeting was working with the Domestic and Family Violence Services in the new year to host a forum to develop a new strategy for the city. I think that's a perfect opportunity for Council to actually find where we fit within that. So that will be one of the actions that come out of that forum. Currently, there is not a domestic and family violence action plan that is active. It was actually completed in the last year, so it's a great opportunity to work with all the service providers to ensure that we're working with them across the city.
Okay, so approving today would be, we won't be doing a strategy, we'll be working with local, the Integrated Systems Working Group on something together.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So the recommendation here is that the report responding to the notice of motion requesting a report be prepared detailing 6 areas of information relating to domestic and family violence responses in the community and council workplace be received and its contents noted. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. I'd now like to open that for any discussion. Councillor Kunzelman.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, Chair, this is a subject close to my heart. I'm here, I declare long-standing membership of Zonta International, whose watchword is advancing the status of women. Council should and has acknowledged the extent of violence in our community. Council's role is support for the organisations helping women and men affected by domestic and family violence, and to some extent providing a unifying role and a collaborative role. And this is not an individualised case management model. Council's formulation of a domestic violence strategy as a developing program has elements that address the problem on the largest scale as evidenced to us through stakeholder agencies. We also offer real support to those who work with us in Council and may be experiencing violence. In addition, the giving of appropriate, well-considered grants of money to community groups helps with raising awareness based on consultation with key stakeholders. In the domestic violence field, there is a shift from simply supporting victims to understanding what causes domestic violence. In doing so, these organisations are reaching out for intervention, for behaviour modification, helping men particularly to understand their motivation and to acknowledge the intergenerational scarring that results from domestic and family violence. Because some men are simply doing what their fathers did, where violence has become normalised. For others, the advancement of women generally is something of a challenge. Social conditions such as unemployment also awaken a learned response. Having said that, I wish to point out the incidence of domestic and family violence across class and gender, education level and cultural backgrounds. From a personal point of view, we have an obligation to call out violence where we see it, although the risks inherent in this are recognised. Anyone becoming aware of domestic violence is urged to use the appropriate channels that guarantee anonymity. I wholeheartedly support Council's commitment to this important issue.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any further discussion? I'd just like to highlight some of the work that's going on separately to the work that's been going into this notice of motion. Both Councillor Kunzelman and I attended the first meeting of the Domestic and Family Violence Prevention Council's Champions Network. So we are two of many elected representatives that sit on that group. This is a collaboration between the Local Government Association of Queensland and the Office of the Premier. I guess for visibility of this committee, some of the work that we did in our first meeting was really interesting, and for us to actually be able to become champions as part of that network, we had to be really honest about where Ipswich City Council sits in terms of its key deliverables on raising awareness of domestic and family violence. We sought the advice from Talia Lovelinay and also Melissa Dower to help us fill out this checklist. And it really highlighted to us that the organisation is doing more now than they ever have, but there's also some work to do. So that, I guess, Champions Network offers up solutions. It also offers us a sounding board to talk to other local governments across the state to ask what they're doing in their communities, but also in their organisations. So Councillor Kunzelman and I are working to update everyone more fulsomely in the next couple of weeks with regards to those conversations that we've had and with the work that we intend on doing with the Champions Network as well. So I just thought it was a really important time to mention that there's lots of moving parts in this, and I wanted to again thank Councillor Doyle for bringing this into focus for Council, because we are doing lots, and that's what we've discovered throughout the collation of all of the information that we see in front of us this morning, but it's about how can we better showcase and stand up and be leaders in this space to our community. So thank you to Councillor Doyle, and I support this report. With no further... Sorry.
May I say something
Yeah,
else?
of course, Mayor.
I commented I'll be supporting this, obviously. I worked for an organisation that was wanting to get white ribbon accreditation, and as part of that, we had to have a certain number of, executives through the training, which is a 4-hour training session. Noting the fact that the statistics show that at least 1 in 4 women have suffered family, domestic and sexual violence. We just need to be really cautious that when we do any programs, that this will be, some of the women that will be on these programs are women who have unfortunately have been through this. And I know I spoke to 2 women after this program that I did. It brought up a lot of things that they had suffered in the past that they had dealt with. I'm just saying, whatever we do, we need to do sensitively.
Absolutely.
Because it will, we don't want to re-traumatise people.
Yep. With no further discussion, we'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Item number 2 this morning is just the confirmation of the minutes from the previous committee. The recommendation here is that the minutes of the CCAS committee held on the 11th of August 2022 be confirmed. I'm happy to move those, and Councillor Kunzelman seconding. Would anyone like to make any amendments to those? No. All those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. Item number 3 this morning is field lighting fees for sporting grounds. This is a report concerning the revised hourly lighting charge for the use of council sporting grounds. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer with regards to this? No. So the recommendation before us this morning is that council adopt the proposed charge of $8.40 per hour, exclusive of discounts, for field lighting with effect from 1 October 2022. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Kunzelman. I'll open that up for any discussion. There being none, we'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Carried. Item number 4 this morning is customer service biannual report card. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer? Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Cahill.
Good morning, my name's Anne Cahill. I'm the Customer Strategy and Experience Manager.
Through the Chair, thank you, Ms Cahill. Thank you very much for this report. I really do appreciate, our focus on continually improving customer service. I'm just looking at page, I guess it's for me, it says page 28 of 60, but I think it's page 1, the 3rd page. Talk about introduction of senior customer service officer positions.
Yes.
And so on. And I see it says 2 senior customer service officer level 3 positions. Is that level 3 as in our EBA, they're a level 3?
Yes.
It is, and they're a senior customer service officer?
Yes,
at
they
level
are
3.
classified as that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
No further questions. Thanks, Ms. Cahill. So the recommendation here is that the report concerning the customer service biannual report card be received and the contents noted. I'm happy to move that. And thank you, Mayor, for seconding. I'd like to open it up for any discussion. After you, Mayor. Thank you.
You're the Chair.
Thank you. Yeah,
Maybe it's just similar just to the importance of this particular project, and then we're taking an organisational wide approach to improving customer service. We are here to deliver services for the residents of Ipswich, so appreciate this, and it's great to see the benchmarking that's going on. And obviously, obviously we're following this project quite closely as well as a council.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. It is definitely one of the most important pieces of work that our council will oversee and needs to be carried out for much longer than just up until 2024. In fact, one of the highlights here for me was just the amount of really useful data that we got in this particular report. It's worth noting the significant increase in calls and interactions with council year on year. I mean, that's skyrocketed, and I know that all of us are feeling that in our inboxes right now. You know, there is a huge volume that council is required to respond to, and that doesn't necessarily correlate with an extremely high FTE growth year on year either. So the team are absolutely hitting it out of the park and ensuring that they're taking care of our residents, and ensuring that for at least more than 70% of the time, those queries and concerns are resolved at that initial interaction, which I think is a really great place for us to be tracking right now and this early in the customer experience strategy rollout. I'd like to thank Anne Cahill for putting this together in such a succinct way to really pull out the things that we're working on next, what we're looking to improve in the future, and what we're doing really well right now. So I look forward to the next report card, and I just know that that great work will continue to be done. I think we've got the right people on the job, so thank you very much. With no further discussion, we'll take that one to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. Moving on to item number 5, which is major community event sponsorships, Christmas carols. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant officer? Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Ms. Gregory.
Carly Gregory, Manager of Marketing and Promotions.
Thank you, Ms. Gregory. Thank you very much for this. It was a very good report, very succinct. And I note that in the community, the fact that we're having the carols in all parts of the city, not just
across the city.
our grand carols at North Ipswich Reserve is very much appreciated by the community. I see that we're the funding's changing slightly. Do you mind going through the rationality for that?
Yeah, sure. I'll just sort of outline our approach. So, as outlined, we're recommending that 4 local major carols receive support on a multi-year agreement. Feedback from all those organising committees was there's a preference for multi-year agreements. It provides surety for funding, and it does assist committees in their planning and budgeting well ahead of time. I will note as well that for most of these committees, we did try and implement this pre-COVID, and of course those plans went awry given the pandemic. I think it's important to note that this council support was never designed to be the sole funding source for events, and the multi-year support enables groups to plan and apply for other sponsorship and grants with confidence, knowing what's coming ahead, and it also gives us that sort of true partnership where we can, as a team, help capacity build as event professionals with these groups that are often volunteers and giving of their time. We've taken a consistent approach to the funding, given that the costings and the format and the attendance has historically been similar across these events. There is a growing number of events coming back online post-pandemic, and our funding model, as you're very well aware, is very competitive. And looking down the line, there's absolutely an increasing demand and pipeline of events coming on board. I think I would still like to note, though, that $15,000 is still significant, given that we've recently capped the community funding at $5,000 for events, given that's been remodelled. I think it's also important to note that there are definitely KPIs for this level of funding, and over the last few years, Council has maintained that level of funding despite the format or attendance benchmarks not always being made. I think we've absolutely done the right thing there. And I think for us, you know, the phasing of this model, so, you know, 15, 12, 10, just allows Council to plan and have a sustainability around our funding as well.
Thank you, Ms. Gregory. What kind of, I guess, audience levels would normally have to apply for that 15,000?
Yeah, for us it's around 4,500 to 6,000 that we would put around a major community event. And we didn't just pluck that number out of the sky. That was based on data that we had probably over the last decade of what was considered a major community event in our area.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
So we've got 3 recommendations this morning. A, that the major community event sponsorship for all 4 major community carols be aligned as a multi-year, 3-year agreements. B, that cash support be provided to each of the Christmas carols of Year 1, $15,000, Year 2, $12,000, and Year 3, $10,000, totalling a cash contribution over 3 financial years of $37,000 for each of the 4 carol events. And C, that all Christmas carols be promoted through Council's Christmas marketing campaign. I'm happy to move those, all of those together. Do I have a seconder for those? Thanks, Councillor Kunzelman. Now I'd like to open that up for any discussion.
Just like to say that I think it's great to have the multi-year approach. I know, running a not-for-profit myself, how important it is rather than each year wondering whether the next dollar is going to come. So that multiple year, and that's a consistent approach you see with the state and federal governments. With its multi-year, then the dollar amount does taper down a bit because it does give organisations that surety and that ability to go out and plan around that.
Absolutely. With no further discussion, we'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's unanimous and carried. Item number 6 this afternoon is major community event sponsorship, New Year's Eve, Tivoli. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer? Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Ms. Gregory.
Thank you. Ms. Gregory, we just spoke earlier about the fact that normally to attract $15,000 you had to have an event that's between $4,500 and $6,000.
Yes.
I note that last year this event attracted 3,000 attendees, yet we're being asked for 20,000. Do you mind taking me through the rationale for that?
Yeah, obviously this started during COVID as a venue for the City New Year's Eve event, given that it used to be held at North Ipswich Reserve, and Tivoli Drive-In offered really the only COVID-safe venue for an event to go ahead during that pandemic time, which was quite unique, and has been holding it since then. The support for this event has been around $15,000 to $20,000, dependent on what they've requested. This group actually did ask for $25,000. We did note that the event in 22 would absolutely need to demonstrate an uplift in attendance to maintain this level of funding. I suppose we're doing this in good faith, given that we're not giving them the full amount that they have requested. Last year was a little bit of a dip. There was still a COVID impact last year, and other events are coming online and it's more competitive. So this is really, I suppose, a trial.
Okay.
Yeah, it has had larger attendance in previous years.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wimley.
So this is 20,000 and no in kind, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And it's only for this year?
Correct. It's a 1 year.
As opposed to the others?
It's not a multi-year agreement.
Yeah.
This is obviously a New Year's Eve event, which is quite different to a Carols event. We're funding Carols event in the others. New Year's Eve has quite a different program, given that there's things like fireworks or lasers and those kind of things involved.
Were there any other competitors for this funding?
We are absolutely in discussions with some other community groups that are seeking funding for New Year's Eve events, yes.
Right, okay, thank you.
So the recommendation here is that Council endorses $20,000 in major community event sponsorship for financial support to Tivoli Social Enterprises Limited for the Celebrate 23 at Tivoli New Year's Eve event. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. I now open that up for any discussion. There being none, I'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? Oh, beg yours.
Through you, Chair, I'm agreeing with this on the 1 year basis, and I'm happy that we're reviewing it again next year.
Thank you. All those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. Item number 7 this afternoon is revised civic and ceremonial events policy. Would anyone like to speak to the relevant council officer with regards to any of the changes made? No, so the recommendation here is that the revised civic and ceremonial events policy, attachment 3, be adopted. I'll move. Do I have a seconder for that? Thanks, Councillor Kunzelman. I'll open that up for any discussion. There being none, we'll take that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous and carried. And that brings us to the end of our committee this afternoon. The time is 6 minutes past 12, so the next committee will start at 16 minutes past 12.